I'm just going to jump right into the whole thing. At what point did you know that this kind of thing, broadcast journalism, is what you wanted to do for your life?
Well, I went to Wartburg College for 2 years and was at KWAR radio there, and decided after those 2 years that I wanted to get into broadcast news, that that's what I really wanted to do. They didn't have a broadcasting program at Wartburg at that time. And so I started checking things out and ended up transferring to Iowa State after I had met Jack Shelley there.
Now, you grew up where?
Cedar Falls.
So did you really, at that point, know much about Jack Shelley, or, because obviously you weren't able to get the TV from Channel 13.
Right. No, I had never heard of Jack Shelley at that point, but here's a kind of a funny story. I went to Iowa State, met Jack, and of course was extremely impressed with him and the program that he had going there. And I came home and I told my dad, you know, I think I met this really neat guy, this really neat professor, Jack Shelley. And before I could go any further, my dad just stopped right there, his mouth fell open, and he said, "You met Jack Shelley?" My dad, of course, had grown up in rural northeast Iowa, and he had listened to Jack do the news every day at noon for years and years, and to him Jack was a very, not only a celebrity, but a very authoritative news figure.
And that was all it took. You were going to Iowa State.
That's right, yeah.
What was it like taking classes from Professor Jack Shelley?
Well, Jack was, it was like, it was almost like listening to the radio every day, because Jack, you know, had those golden tones. He was a very caring professor. He was also my advisor, and to this day I still call him occasionally for advice, kind of fatherly advice. But it was just, I don't know, he in some ways was like, I suppose, every other professor, but in most ways you knew nobody ever questioned what he was saying, because he'd been there, he'd done it. He had all these stories about being in the, you know, covering the war, and all these other terrific stories that he could relate, and yet he was really there to teach. There are some stories that I didn't hear until long after I left Iowa State. I was quite surprised, because he just, you know, he wasn't the type of guy that would really go on and on about himself. He was there to teach the students and help the students.
So as opposed to some people like, for example, Kevin Cooney, who had grown up seeing Jack Shelley, knowing who he was, your impressions were much more formed by the Jack Shelley you knew at Iowa State, as opposed to any reputation that led you into it.
Exactly, yeah. As I said, my dad knew who he was, and so then I began to realize that Jack Shelley was more than just a professor, but it was his manner that when I met him, and just his caring attitude, and he knew all about the program and all about what had to be done if I was going to transfer there, and just the appeal of not only Jack, but really of the Iowa State journalism department as a whole, too, just all the programs that they had there, and that's what I was really interested in.
Now, out of college, you went directly to KCAU, is that correct?
No, I worked for 10 years in radio, actually 6 years full-time. I was worked at a station in Ames while I was going to school, and I worked at KAYL in Storm Lake, that was a radio station there, as a reporter and news director, and then went to KCAU, where I was assignment editor and then later news director.
And you went to KCAU then when?
Let's see, I went there in '81 as assignment editor.
Now, you were the 11th recipient of the Jack Shelley Award for outstanding radio. What was it like back in 1982 when you found out that you had won the award?
Well, it was the night of Jack Shelley's retirement. We had a big party for him. There were several hundred people there. We'd gone in with the Iowa State Journalism Department, the IBNA had, and there was this large, you know, farewell retirement dinner. The host was Tim Renshaw, who was the president at that time. He was wearing a tuxedo. And it had been a big evening, all kinds of testimonials and a bit of a roast. And then they got down to the Jack Shelley Award, which was the final event of the night, and I had not really given it a thought. Of course, didn't know I'd been nominated. And Jack, in his usual style, did not name the nominee, but instead said he would keep that as a secret, and proceeded to read a little bit about the nominee. And of course, instantly, I knew it was me from what he was reading. And it was just, I just went numb. I couldn't believe it. I was only 29 years old. The youngest, at least at that point, to ever win that award. And all these years I've regretted what I said. I made my way up to the podium, and Jack, was congratulating me, former student. He was quite proud and wanted me to say a few words. And I stood in front of the microphone. The only thing I could think to say, the only thing was, I thought only the old guys got this award. And that got a laugh, but I was very embarrassed, and the next morning I had breakfast with some of the former winners and apologized for that, and they still thought it was one of the funniest things they'd heard, and no problem.
I'm not sure. You may still be the youngest to have ever won it.
Yeah, I don't know.
As I look at the list here in front of me. As the years have gone on, what has being a recipient of the award meant to you?
Well, it's...
Every year when you show up and you see this list,
Yeah.
and you look and it says 1982 Cliff Brockman, what does that do for you even now?
Well, it's always an award that I have treasured greatly. And I've won several awards, I guess, like many people have. But this one was particularly special and still is special. I have all these years had it hanging on my wall above my desk at home. And frankly, there are times when you wonder why you're in the business you're in, because it can be pretty crazy and sometimes pretty cutthroat. But it always reminds me that that's why I really got into the broadcast journalism business, and really why I enjoy it still. Just that grounding that I got from Jack and Iowa State University when I was there.
This will sound, Cliff, like an ignorant question, but what were the reasons cited for why you received the award when you did? I mean, obviously this is for outstanding service. Sometimes it's for some limited body of work that was just extraordinary. Some it's for a lifetime achievement.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that they hung their hat on back 20 years ago?
Well, I had been the president of the IBNA the year before, and had served on the board for 4 or 5 years before that, and had been very active in the open records, open meetings law, particularly the open meetings law. We had a new open meetings law at that time, and there were lots and lots of violations because the government bodies were generally used to meeting in closed session. This new open meetings law that we had at that time, which we still have, really opened things up. And I was very active heading efforts to police that, if you will, and kind of set city and county officials straight when they violated that law. So that was one thing, I guess. I didn't really have a lot to do with it, but at that time cameras in the courtroom was about to come in, and I was president of the IBNA when that was approved. Again, I had very little to do with that, other than to provide our support, the IBNA's support to that cause. But overall, I think probably the award was given just for my efforts on behalf of the IBNA. It was still is, an organization that I really think highly of, and did think highly of at the time, and worked very hard for.
Certainly the open meetings law, the open records laws, anybody who had anything to do with that, that's certainly more than enough reason to be given all sorts of honors. You've had a hand in shaping coverage and reporting on a variety of stories over the course of time. I don't want to be trite and say what's the biggest, the best, etc. that you've ever covered, but what are some stories that when you sit back and, I don't know, if you're going to move and you decide, well, I can throw some things away, what are tapes of stories that you make sure you hold on to?
Oh, boy. You know, that might go back to my radio days, Jeff. When I was just a young kid out of college and I was working my first full-time job at Storm Lake, and there was a plant there, a packing plant called the High Grade plant, meat packing plant, was our largest employer in the county. And they constantly had difficulties keeping the plant open. It was open and closed and open. And it was just an ongoing story, people not knowing if they were going to have work or not work. And I spent many hours on that story, developed many sources, being a one-man radio operation in those days, why I was up in the middle of the night sometimes, or of course up early every morning, and it was a big story to be covering.
Obviously, this business has changed an awful lot, yet you still get up every day and go in and try to put a good product on the air. What is it about the business, about the calling, if you will, that leads you to still be interested in doing it after all these years?
Well, I think it's just the opportunity to learn something new every day. It's just always exciting because you never know what's going to happen. Things can change in a moment. Just the excitement of that and of you know, being in the middle of things. And you're right, it's been, gosh, almost 30 years now since I graduated, even more than that since I've been in the business. And almost every day, there are days, but almost every day I'm excited to get up and come in and get going and see what's going to happen. You know, even though I'm not always directly involved in the product, and it seems like more and more I'm involved in business, the business end of things.
What role would you say a station, you can talk radio or television, what role does it play in the lives of the communities it serves now in 2001 as opposed to 30 years ago? We hear about the internet and all of these other sources for information, but what is it about the local broadcasting station that, to me, is still an integral part of people's daily lives?
Well, I think you hit right on it there, and it may sound kind of trite, but it is the local news. That's still the one thing that we can provide that people can't get anywhere else. We can provide the news of their community, and not only the news of their community, speaking from a journalistic point, but even you know, local commercials, those things we love to hate. Where else can you find out what's on sale at your local store than on your local TV or radio station? And that's why people, I think, still tune into both radio and television.
Now, at some point, people are going to pull this tape off the shelf at the Broadcasting Archives across the street, and they're going to probably have to convert it to whatever format they're using then. They're going to say, okay, this Brockman guy, they're going to get some impressions. Long down the road when you're done with this business, what would you like people to think of when they think of you and your body of work in this field?
Oh, boy.
Good ones early in the morning here on you, don't I?
Yeah, that's pretty, you're asking the tough ones here. Well, I hope that they just will think that, that I was responsible in my reporting of the news, that I was honest, and that I treated people fairly. It's always been my motto to treat other people like I would like to be treated. We still have to gather the news. Sometimes it's difficult, but I try to think and try to talk to my people about, if you're in that situation, how would you like to be treated, knowing, you know, we still have to get the story, but we can do that in a certain manner that that at least is going to be respectful of those people that we're covering.
Anything else about Jack, or a story that you like to tell, either about Jack or on Jack?
Oh,
Part of
boy.
what we're going to do with this clip is to put a few things together to play
Yeah.
that night. Anything?
Oh, hello. Just lost him. Story about Jack.
street supervisor, and we've had